April 12th, 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, sinners and saints, welcome to the episode of the Gold Zone here on Game On Wisconsin. I'm your host. I'm Jacob Westendorf. I am joined, as always, by the incredibly dapper, and is that a Carhartt shirt you've got going there, Mr. Morley?
Oh, yeah.
Why are you wearing a shirt that has sleeves on it?
What do you mean?
It's 80 degrees where I'm at. I can assume it's similar to that where you are.
It's like 65 degrees here. It's nice. It's like a nice, not chilly, but like beautiful spring day. Probably not nice enough that you're gonna want to like wear, bust out your cut off jean shorts and your cut off t-shirt. But I mean, hey, it's nice. I'll take it.
Yeah, I got my. I think they call these hot jackets. I don't know, but that's what I've got. I rode my motorcycle today. Today's a good day, man. It's beautiful outside. And then, of course, in true Midwest form, Saturday, it's going to be like 75 with thunderstorms. And then Sunday, it goes back into like the 40s. And then it's kind of crappy for the next week. But that's not why you guys are here. You're not here for weather updates. You guys are here to talk about the draft. And if you guys want to do that, first and foremost, check that bottom line right there. Buy the Green Bay Draft Guide. It actually says $8.99. So our producer sucks because it's actually $9.99 now. If you are a procrastinator.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Joe Douglas.
Did I do that right?
That's right. So it is now $9.99, but it's still very affordable, very inexpensive. Go get yourself a Green Bay Draft Guide today and find out 225 profiles. We'll talk about some of the guys that we are going to talk about tonight. We are going to start the realest of the real football players that we are discussing tonight, and a need for the Packers, if we're being honest. Edge, pass rushers. As of right now, the Packers have one healthy player on their roster that you feel like pretty good about. It's Preston Smith. You might have some good feelings about Kingsley Enagbare. I'm not saying that I do not, but he is a fifth-round rookie. There are certainly no guarantees that he is an NFL player, or at least a consistent NFL player, I should say. And Rashawn Gary's injured. And, maybe I just have David Bakhtiari PTSD from an ACL standpoint, but there's no guarantees that Rashawn's going to be the same player that he was prior to that injury. I know there was some discussion that they could free up some cap space with an extension and stuff this offseason. They haven't done that yet. I don't know if they will, or trade him, which that would be really stupid if they did that. But I mean,
would it?
Yes, absolutely, it would be. You're not actually going to advocate for that, are you?
No, not advocate, but I think it's an interesting conversation because what exactly do you do with him? One, he's coming off an ACL. What do you pay him? Do you pay him early or do you wait? Let him hit the open market. Two, he represents himself.
I have an answer to your question. He does not represent himself. He has, it's his own agency. But
it's his own agency. Is it not him, though? I thought it was him.
No, he has an agent. I've tried to talk to him before. That's how I know that. But he has an agent. The answer to your question is Elton Jenkins. That's what you do with him.
Yeah.
You just let him play, make sure he looks like the same-ish player, and pay him based off that. If he doesn't look like the same-ish player and he looks like a shell of himself, then you just let him walk. It's unfortunate timing with his injury and everything, but you let him walk. This guy is a cornerstone to your defense. He's a cornerstone to your leadership committee. He is either your first or second best player on defense when they're all healthy. And as far as the entire team goes, might be the best player on the entire team. And this is a team there's going to be some transition, obviously. Preston Smith, who knows how much longer he's going to be around. Kenny Clark is probably going to be around for a little while, but Darnell Savage, which that might be a good thing, but Darnell Savage may not be around. Rasul Douglas, you go to the offensive side of the ball, there's plenty of guys to talk about there. But Rashawn Gary's a guy that, you absolutely want him in your locker room and for an extended period of time. And I can tell you this, when it comes to everything that he can control, there's nobody with a better work ethic than Rashawn Gary. And you guys have seen that throughout the offseason. And he is chomping at the bit to get back. So that's the take on that. But the point I'm getting at is, okay, if you want to potentially let him walk, or what if he's not the same player? Now that just makes it an even bigger need. Like, because I am saying that this is a need for the Packers, assuming Rashawn Gary is going to play. If he's not going to play or not in the team's future plans, then they need to replace him, and they might need to draft two of these guys that we're talking about.
And when is he going to play? Right? Like, is he ready opening day?
No.
And if he is, you know, like you just brought up Elton, who was ready opening day, probably wasn't ready opening day. And we saw that throughout the year as he kind of, you know, they gave him the extension. And I'm trying to go back and think. I think they gave him the extension pretty much after, like, he had like put 3 weeks together of like, oh, that's Elton. That looks like Elton again. When you could kind of see him get his feet under him. And the thing with Rashawn, he doesn't really rely on the lateral stuff. Like, he is a run through your face type guy. And I think that'll come back. You know, he's not out there trying to make cuts or, you know, do anything like that. He is literally like, I'm going to overwhelm the offensive tackle, play in and play out. And that's kind of how he makes his money. So, and that's leading us into the Packers, you know, draft guide and the Packers fits and what they like. Typically that is those types of guys are who they like. You fall in love with the bendy types that everyone talks about, like their ability to, you know, bend the edge, turn the corner and get to the quarterback. The Packers don't really care about that. They would rather you just go through the offensive tackle to get to the quarterback. And there are some guys in this class
or haven't cared. I mean, I'll get to the point of they haven't cared here in just a minute.
It could change. Like, it's a really interesting topic, and we'll get into that just because, you know, we've talked about on this show or in the guide in the past, and even the way our guide is set up right now and the Packers people is set up, it's very much set up to kind of mirror what Mike Pettin wanted in this defense. And, you know, Joe Barry has not always played with the big 270-pound Rashawn Garys of the world. He has had lighter edge rushers. And I honestly think in Barry's first couple of years, it just hasn't really been a need. You know, I think Joe looked at Preston, Rashawn, and Z for one of those years and just say, yeah, we're good. I can work with that. Any good coach would say that, right? But if my edge room is Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and Rashawn Gary, yeah, if I can't work with that, I shouldn't be in the league. But like, we are at a point where, man, they might need to add somebody. And as we saw with the Eagles last year, and really it's always been true, how many edge rushers is too many?
No such thing.
No such thing. Absolutely. So bring me the guys that hit the quarterbacks, and let's talk about those guys, Jacob.
Yeah, the first one, an edge one on the board, is Deacon Gray, Westendorf. Unfortunately, he's not draft eligible until 2045, so we've got some time to go.
Heavy hands.
Of that, but
real heavy hands. Yep.
Yeah, 5-star recruit from the University of Michigan. They just won 3 straight national championships while he was there, so that was pretty cool. But that's good. Some time from now.
Anchors really well. A lot of sand in the pants.
Yeah, runs through your face, battle cry type stuff. Yeah. Anyways,
I was waiting for something else in the pants.
I mean,
as a dad, that's probably changed a few diapers or two.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, he is his mother's son, so no, she'd kill me if I said that. But, anyways, to get to the point here, so Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, those guys are not going to be Green Bay Packers. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on those guys just because they will be. And Anderson, there has been some scuttle that maybe there's some medical issues that could push him down the board a little bit. But I don't want to talk about Anderson, but what you just said, to me, it's fascinating because the more that we do this, the more connections you make and the more people you hear stuff from. And the more I learn that this draft cycle, it's a game, man. It's just a game, especially to a lot of these big personalities and these big media types. This stuff about Will Anderson is not anything new. Like, there are teams that have red flagged his knee as being a potential issue. Now, it's not every team. Some teams think it's fine, but the fact of the matter is, like, the knee stuff for Anderson has been there for a long, long time. And it's almost like the media, it's finally starting to get leaked out
because we're in that period of time where there's nothing else to talk about. And it's like they sat on it. And the fact that we're starting to see him drop in some of these mocks to not really be like the slam dunk third overall pick. He's like 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, he's still really good, but he might drop a few picks because of that knee. And you might see him get jumped by a guy like Wilson, who might be, and I know is, some teams' edge one in this year's draft over Anderson because of the knee and because of what they think they can be in 3 years. So it is, the process is always fascinating. And the more I learn about it, the more fascinating it is, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with what you're saying there. I think that I am convinced that the if he gets to 10 and is sitting there for Philadelphia, Howie Roseman's not going to pass on him. Like, I just can't anticipate that being the case.
Nor should he.
And that's why I'm saying these guys, those two guys, he won't be their guy, but like him and Tyree Wilson, they're not going to be there. And I cannot this year, almost for anybody, and we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. We'll have our pre-draft show on that Wednesday night before the draft, the night before the draft. And I can't endorse like a big trade up really for almost anybody. And when I say big, I mean like, 15 to 10 or something like that might be okay if they want to do that. But anything like high, well, they're not getting to 9 because that's Chicago. So 8 would be the next spot you can go to. This isn't a class like that. And there's not players like that. So if this guy was going to be, in my opinion, someone like Myles Garrett, which there aren't many guys like that, that's the whole point, then maybe, sure. Green Bay wouldn't be picking where they are though, if they were in a position where I thought trading up for a guy like that was worthwhile. So my question, those are the big two, right? Wilson and then Will Anderson. Who's your next guy? Who's the third guy? Because there is some difference. Some guys like Nolan Smith, some guys like Lucas Van Ness, some guys like whoever it is. Who's your third guy on this list?
Well, I love Nolan Smith. I haven't really let my mind go there with Nolan Smith just because I do, he would be an outlier for the Packers, which, they've proven that they will do if they like the guy enough, which I think is a good process. But man, Nolan he reminds me of Clay. Like that, you turn on the tape and that is who I get vibes of when I watch him. For how big he is, or lack of how big he is, I think it was Peter that pointed out the other day to us. He's like, dude, Quay Walker's bigger than him. And he's not wrong. He is. But Nolan Smith plays the run as well as any edge defender in this class at his size. Now, can he do that at the NFL level with grown men? I mean, he did it in the SEC, so that's as close as you're going to get. I think he can. But you look at his get off the line of scrimmage, and you look at his, he is the Clay Matthew comparison to me comes in when you watch how relentlessly he plays the game. He is never out of a play. He is never not giving 110% effort. And to me, to pair him with Rashawn Gary, who is the same guy, who does not know what it means to take a play off, I think those guys would feed off of each other. I think they would be the perfect complement to each other on opposite ends. I think Nolan Smith would be the changeup in this lineup of edge rushers for this Packers team. So the fact that he may be there at 15, there are like 3 guys in this class that I would be really, really excited about at 15. And Nolan Smith is one of them for me. Realistic guys. Like Nolan Smith realistically could be there at 15. So he is my edge 3. And I honestly, I would put Nolan up there, tier 1 being Will and Wilson. Tier 1.5 would be Nolan before I go to tier 2. Like he is the next guy who is a cut above the rest of the guys for me. What about you? Let me guess. Let me guess. Is it like Eminem?
Well, it's not exactly a secret, but yes, I've talked about him a bunch on my time. I guess my question is, you said there are 3 guys there at 15. I know one of them who goes by initials and plays on offense. So that's one. Nolan Smith's the other. Who's the third guy that you're like just incredibly excited if they take him?
Paris Johnson.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think him, because I don't think he's going to be there at 15. But if he is, and they take him,
if he gets past 9 against
Chicago,
if he gets past 9, then the Bears screwed something up. Like, honestly, I don't think there's a better like marrying of need, talent, and draft position than Chicago, Paris Johnson, and left tackle. Because I know, like, one of my least favorite talking points about the draft in general is I saw a draft, and granted, it's Adam Rank and he's a moron, and I understand, but like, he had the Bears picking. His mock draft was like, this is what I would do if I were in this position, and he had them picking Jackson Smith and Jigba. And to which I'm like, I'm not going to, if the Bears did that, like, I'm not going to knock them. Smith and Jigba is a really good player. I just don't think that's the best use of that resource. I don't think the 15th overall pick is the best use necessarily of that resource, depending on how the draft falls. But that's a philosophical discussion that we can have in a couple weeks. It really depends on what everything looks like. But his commentary in there was, I trust Ryan Poles to find another Braxton Jones like he did in the 5th round last year. And I'm just like, Jones was fine, but like, again, Paris Johnson is the only tackle in this draft class that, like, if they pick him, I'm like, I am comfortable with him starting for Bakhtiari next year. Like, he is the Bakhtiari replacement in this draft class. The other guys, I worry about Broderick Jones. Darnell Wright's a right tackle. I would take him at 15, but like, knowing he's only going to be a right tackle, I can't get on board with that. But you asked me about Myles Murphy. So yes, if there is a guy in his class, he's not the same level athlete, but as far as a clone of Rashawn Gary, it's Myles Murphy. And the Packers have done really well with Rashawn Gary, obviously. Murphy out of Clemson. I know some people will helmet scout and tell me like, oh, this, and this. I don't care about those things. It just, Florida State pass rushers weren't anything, and you all love Brian Burns anyways. So I don't care where they went to school. Some of those things, it just doesn't matter to me on that. But I mean, 6'5", 270, again, just kind of a Rashawn Gary clone. He's able to kind of run through you. Like, he's able to do that. He's a good run defender, which is something that I think the Packers need to be better at just in general. I think their fundamentals on defense are pretty poor. And don't worry, Joe, I'm getting there. Give me just a minute. But Murphy is my guy. He's 3rd, and he's the guy who, like, to quote my friend Ross Uglum, and I will have a few words to say about him at the end of the show here, but to quote my friend Ross Uglum, I remember when the first year the Pack-A-Day podcasts were in existence, it was the year the Packers took Jair Alexander. And we did like a little draft hangout thing, kind of like on this platform, but I think it was Zoom or something, to discuss like the draft as it was happening. So it's like Green Bay goes on the clock, then they trade back, and then they move. Andy had a bunch of dudes from like Packers Twitter essentially on, and it was awesome. It was fun. Something I would, think would be fun to do again if that was something he'd want to do, but he's the boss, not me. But the point I'm getting at is Ross had said in there, I'm just warning you, if they took, and it was Harold Landry at that particular year. He says, if they take Harold Landry, I will not be wearing any clothes. If the Packers take Myles Murphy, I am not wearing any clothes, which is a problem from the standpoint that I am officiating a wedding that weekend. So I think there's a requirement at minimum for pants. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to wear any if they took him at 15. Like, that's one of the, and I'll do this. I have a list. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Westendorf. I do it every year. Guys I would trade up for, spoiler alert, the answer to that's going to be like nobody, just because of the stuff I said earlier. Guys I'm cool with at 15, guys I'm pissed about if they pick him there, guys I'm cool with in a trade back scenario, stuff like that. Murphy's the guy. And I do. I love him. I've loved him the entire time. I was bummed when I thought he wasn't going to test, and then he did and tested like an alien. And as soon as he tested, it was like Green Bay Packer. Our buddy Russ Brown from Cover One and Lions Wire now, congratulations to Russ on that, was able to basically said the same thing, that he thinks the Packers would run the card up, and if Murphy was available. And I would too. You're asking me as far as like guys, I think that, well, for starters, I don't have like a set board for who's where, but I think that Murphy's would be like if I took out if I did it Packers specific and basically took out quarterbacks, because I do that, like Green Bay doesn't need to take a quarterback in my opinion. If I took those out, Miles Murphy probably lands in the top 5 to 7, somewhere around there. He's really good. I really like him a lot. And to the point where that to me is one of the best players in the draft. They take him there. I would take him over a lot of players, and that's one of them. Who's somebody that maybe is, I don't even want to say is, well, actually, before we do that, let's do this. The Packers have hosted 2 guys. One of them's an edge rusher. Truly, one of them is like a projection to that. They've hosted 2 guys on top 30 visits the last couple days. Weeks. Will McDonald, and a little nugget. If you listen to today's Pack a Day podcast, Owen Reese points out that Brian Gutekunst, Milt Hendrickson, and one of Green Bay scouts was in attendance. They spoke with Will McDonald at length there, and then they spoke with him again, obviously, at his visit. So there is some interest in Will McDonald, and I mean, it's not just lip service if they're doing all of those things, I don't think. So this is where we start talking about, do they want a potential change up in the room to your 3 guys that you have right now, Enigbari, Preston, and Rashawn, is basically run through your face. Well, McDonald's not that. He's going to bend the edge. He kind of played defensive tackle when he was at Iowa State, which is weird, but they did that to him. The other one is Georgia Tech's Keon White. And this guy is pure projection. Morley, we were talking about him a little bit earlier. I will not be surprised if he's the 15th overall pick. And I am not endorsing that when I say that, because as you mentioned, I do not know what he is good at right now. And I was going to say that's different, not that different from Rashawn Gary, but it is, because Rashawn, at least we knew if you plug him in on the edge, he's going to set the edge. He can play the run and play it well. I don't know if Keon White can do that. Now, that's a guy who athletic freakazoid. If they have an extra 2nd round pick from the Jets, or if they just took him at 45, I'm cool. Like, I really am. I am okay with that. Green Bay has the luxury, I guess, from the standpoint of they're kind of retooling to where they can take a risk on a player like that. But a top 15 pick, and granted, I was not thrilled with the Rashawn Gary pick when it was made because of kind of the same stuff I'm saying now. I don't believe in guarantees when it comes to the draft because there's no such thing. What's the line from Tommy Boy? If you want me to take a dump in a box and slap a guarantee on it, I can do it. I got spare time. That's kind of how that works in the draft. Like, there are no guarantees. There are no sure things or anything like that. But I need somebody that is able in the top 15 to contribute early, and especially with a team that is going through some like Green Bay, I mean, realistically, has not made any outside additions save for Travarius Moore, which, I mean, he's mostly a special teamer. So, like, they haven't made any outside additions. The only way they're going to get better from this offseason to the next is by trading Aaron Rodgers, which maybe that'll happen. Maybe it won't. I still think it will. And who they draft. And when you're doing that, you can't be like, well, they didn't get any better because Keon White is now their 4th edge rusher, and he really doesn't play a whole hell of a lot. Kind of like that. So those are 2 guys that they've had. What's your take on those 2 players and what can you see as far as their fit in Green Bay?
Well, I don't think Keon White's very good. I've watched him, and I don't get it. And I think a lot of this is Daniel Jeremiah's fault because he had him like mocked very high early, and he's kind of gone down since then. And so I don't know if this is someone that he really liked or had heard that teams really liked, and now he's kind of like tapered, kind of coming off that a little bit.
For those of you that have bought a draft guide, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek for this. Keon White is in the last group of guys that we ranked for the edge group. So he is edge number 15 behind the likes of Nick Herbig and Byron Young. He's 1 notch ahead of Will McDonald, which is interesting for that ranking. I don't necessarily agree with that, but those are guys.
I don't agree with the Will McDonald ranking either. I think a lot of that.
Any bad ranking in the guide is because of either Ross Uglum or Kent Swanson. Those are the 2.
The edge was Matt Lane's, and he does not like him. Did not like him.
Well, Matt Lane is ugly, and he's come on the show before, and honestly, like, he brought the overall attractiveness level of the show like down 3 notches, which is hard to do when yours truly is the host. But I mean, he even made you look kind of ugly, which is tough.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Poor Matt. I'm gonna have to send him a
the thing with Will that people are gonna get upset about is he doesn't play the run very well. But I think it was I was talking to Justice Mosqueda about him, or I listened to something about him, and I think he puts it really well. If you just delete every rep that he played of 4I for that defense in your head, and you just get rid of it.
Yep.
Then projecting to what he will actually do in the NFL, you can see that because and to just, I mean, 4I, you're playing inside of the tackle, and they're just going to.
For those of you that don't really know exactly what that means, think like Kenny Clark-ish.
So area. think he's 240, and he's going up against the likes of 320-pound offensive tackles that are just going to eat him for breakfast in that role. Now there are other things about him in run defense that you would still like to see a little bit better, but I don't really care that much if you can get after the quarterback. And I think he can as well as almost anyone in this draft class. Like he is the thing. Okay, and here's the thing about Will McDonald that I like about you. Guy's a playmaker. I think he's got the most forced fumbles of anyone in this year's draft class.
Something, by the way, Green Bay needs more of, because Bill Huber wrote an article about it. They don't have and Andy Herman did a Pack in the Podcast episode about it. They don't have a ton of guys that are playmakers, guys who make a lot of plays. And that's on defense too, which is wild when you consider the investment they've made.
And something like that oddly translates to the NFL.
Yes.
Like, I don't know what it is, but some guys just have a knack for getting the ball out. And Will McDonald's one of those guys. So at 15, I think that would be rich for me. But we talk a lot about in this year's draft class, like it's kind of like 13 to 60. They're all in the same bucket. And so you can't really be mad about it if they take a guy at 15 that you thought should go at 45 because they just liked it, So that's that. I would be okay. I would be able to talk myself into Will. It wouldn't be my first pick, it would be odd, but the Packers do odd stuff in the first round. Like they just always do for whatever reason, every year I'm kind of surprised what they do. And then you go back and look at it and you go, well, yeah, I get it, but it's just not, it's just not like the common thought on what they should do. So bringing him in for a visit was really interesting. Obviously they like the guy a lot, and he's tough to project because if you tell me, well, if you want him, you're going to have to take him at 15, maybe, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's there at 45. I wouldn't be shocked if they have an extra first round pick or extra 2 second round picks either, or want to trade back. Like, I mean, there's so many different scenarios that could happen, which would be interesting. Keon White, I would be hard. It would be hard for me to get behind that pick. It'd be hard for me to watch them take a 24-year-old rookie for 2 years in a row. And especially Keon White, who's, at least with Devontae Wyatt, the thought was this guy's ready to roll, which he wasn't. But in any case, Keon White, like, he's not ready to roll at all. I don't know what you even do with him. I don't even know if he's an edge. I think he might be a 3-tech for some teams. So it's tough. It's tough. I don't necessarily know why they brought him in, and you never do. Sometimes it's just to get a question answered that they have about something that maybe came up. So it's tough. It's tough to say. But both of those guys in the draft guide, like Keon White is a very high fit. He does not have, and here's the thing, the Packers, you look at everyone they've played, drafted, all that stuff, they care a lot about broad jump for these edge rushers. And Will McDonald is a 99th percentile broad jumper. Keon White is like in the 70s, which is impressive because he's 285. But man alive, I don't know. Those two guys are polar opposites, and it is interesting to see what they're doing. Another guy, do you want me to bring up the guy that we talked about today, Jacob? The other guy that we talked about that we're like, I just have a sinking suspicion that this guy's going to be the pick.
Yeah.
So that guy, I mean, two other guys I'll bring up, and these guys are both like five-star first-tier Packers. Like, they hit every single threshold. One of them is Isaiah Foskey, the Notre Dame kid. I would be very like whatever. Like, if they took him at 15,
I can't.
He's a good run defender. Like, I would be like, okay, well, at least you can say that, he can do that. But and that you think you can get more out of him because he's an athletic marvel. But at 15, again, that would be rich, but it's the same conversation as Will McDonald. Like if you wanted him at 45, he might not be there. So if you really love the kid, take him. And then the other guy that really isn't talked about a ton, we liked him quite a bit in the draft guide. I have heard that he is not as highly ranked in the NFL, but that is the Zach Harrison kid out of Ohio State. First tier guy, 92nd percentile, 274, 6'5", was a big time recruit coming to Ohio State. I think he was a high 5-star, and a lot of people were like, he's the next Chase Young. He's the next Bosa. He did not turn out to be that, but he's got all the intangibles, and the Packers fall for that stuff. So he's the guy to keep an eye on as well, just coming out of Ohio State. But other than that, there's how many tier 1 guys were even in this? I think it's only 7. So it's hard to say. Let's see here. Well, three tier 1 guys only that hit every single metric that they typically look to. The metrics that Rashawn Gary all had, Preston Smith has. Kingsley oddly was like a tier 2 guy last year, even though he didn't work out super well. But he hit on the stuff that they like. So it's interesting. Van Ness is nearly a tier 1 guy, and we haven't even talked about him yet. He's someone that's been linked to the Packers quite a bit, almost to the point where I think people have gotten bored of it because he does seem like he would be a really high fit in Green Bay. He does a lot of the stuff that they really like. He is a raw, toolsy guy that is just scratching the surface, I think, on how good he could be. But have you watched him, Jacob? And what were your thoughts about Iowa Joe? Yeah, Van Ness is actually tier 0. He's a tier 0 guy. He's above 1. Wait, is 0 above 1?
It's before 1. I don't know if it's above 1.
Yeah.
To answer Labo's question real quick, Ojulari is one of my guys if they were going to do like a change-up thing, and he's ranked highly in the draft guide. And if you don't have one,
like him a lot.
Feel free to grab one there. Zach Harrison, I've rooted against for 2 years. And he's interesting to me just because he has all the traits and he looks like a Buckeye pass rusher, which maybe doesn't make sense to you if you're not a Big Ten football fan, but in the ilk of the Bosa brothers who every time you see them, it's just okay, this guy's going to beat our ass for 4 quarters every time we play them. And he had some big moments, relatively quiet when they played against Michigan. The whole Buckeyes defense was relatively quiet in those particular games, but the traits are there. Certainly another guy that feels like a later, not a later, day 3, but day 2, round 3 type of pick. And it's just holy crap, this freako athlete is still just sitting there on the edge. We didn't get a guy early because we drafted Michael Mayer at 15. So we're just going to try and grab this freakazoid here at 78 and kind of run from there. And then, who did you ask me about? Was it Harrison? And I missed that.
Yeah.
Harrison, yeah.
No, and then Van Ness.
Oh, I do like him. He is 1, 2, 3, 4 on my list as far as edge guys. I've got him above Nolan Smith. Maybe that is some of my Packer bias, creeping in, just that I like the bigger guys. I could see the projection of him playing inside and out. I do maybe sometimes put a little too much weight on who's your best game against another premier draft prospect, or what's your top game against a premier draft prospect. So if you're playing if you're playing in Don Brown's defense and that's man coverage, it's okay, so how did that corner hold up in man coverage against Chris Olave or, whatever great receiver that he played against or something like that? Van Ness is somebody who played against Peter Skoronski. Flip on the Northwestern tape. Van Ness wins that matchup. And I have a pretty sizable opinion about Peter Skoronski as well, whether it's at tackle or guard. I don't really care. Ohio State, that's another game. They have some moments in there. And Ohio State is a game where, if Iowa has a player pop in it, it's kind of why I like Jack Campbell as much as I do too. You just kind of go into that game assuming athletic mismatch, because Ohio State's an athletic mismatch against every team except for 2 in the entire country. So when those things happen, I like, and Van Ness to me, admittedly, is a guy who I think can do some things in year 1, but I do think it is a projection because, as it's pointed out, he didn't start at Iowa. He kind of rotated in and out.
But he didn't start at Iowa, but he played over 600 snaps.
Yeah, so
Like,
that doesn't
just
matter
think-
a whole hell of a lot.
I
And he's not
think-
going to start in Green Bay if he can play over 600 snaps. And his ability, like, I could picture him day one being a rotational guy on the edge, and then sometimes being a the guy at the 3 tech or a 4-eye or something like that next to Kenny Clark, or give Kenny Clark a break if Devontae Wyatt is having a year 2 breakout type of season as well.
Yeah. And then I was going to say with Van Ness, like, so he did, like, people, well, he didn't start. It's like, man, that's just not really how they do it at Iowa either. And that Iowa defense was one of the best in the country last year. It's not like he was sitting behind complete bums. And he played, he played all over the line of scrimmage. Like, he still is raw in that regard, that he didn't get to hone in on one spot and just kind of like, hey, I want to perfect my craft as an edge rusher. I think he's raw in the sense of, like, I don't think he always has a plan or a backup plan if his initial move doesn't work. And I think you can work with that. But, man, his levers and the way he uses his length to his advantage and plays with leverage at his size, like, that gets me excited. Like, that really does. And I think he's a guy that has as many tools as anyone in this draft class. And people talk about, like, Tyree Wilson being the toolsy guy. I would put Van Ness kind of up there with him because they're similar in size and athleticism. And for whatever reason, Van Ness just kind of is, I don't want to say lost in the shuffle in this year's edge class, but he kind of is the forgotten man that's probably a top 15, top 20 pick. And part of that is because this is a really good edge class. And he's kind of the guy that doesn't really have the same type of tape as everyone else. But in flashes, if you're looking for it, it's there. It'll find you. So
this is a good question here too. What percentage do you think he's? For me, it's like 30, if that.
Yeah,
like, I mean,
he's got.
I remember after the combine, and it's always funny how this thing kind of goes like this, right? Because we're bored and we just don't know what we're doing half the time. So, like, what was it yesterday? Bill Polian had something come out that basically said, guys don't rocket up the draft boards. We just catch up to what's actually happening. And, like, these guys know, most guys know the entire time. There are no late risers. There's no, like, things like that. It's similar to, like, when Baker Mayfield was the number 1 overall pick. It's like he probably always was in the eyes of John Dorsey. Maybe not always, but, like, after a certain, early point, he was in the eyes of John Dorsey. But we just heard Sam Darnold and we heard Josh Allen. Then eventually it was like, oh, it's Baker. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they went from there. When it comes to Van Ness, it was like after the combine, you had all those pictures of, what's the phrase Owen used? And I think it's a Mike Mayockism. He's very body beautiful. So, like, if he steps off, if my chest and abs looked like Lucas Van Ness's, I would never wear a shirt. And people would be okay with that. Versus now, if I don't wear a shirt, people vomit. Like, I understand that. But the point I'm getting at is you go through all those things. People become folk heroes based on stuff like that. And I hate it. I hate the Cody Mauch teeth thing. I hated the Quinn Miters gut thing. I like all of those things. I think they're stupid because I think they undermine who these players are as players. It's the same as, like, Gardner Minshew warms up in a jockstrap kind of thing. It's like it either makes players better than they are, or, like, that becomes their whole entire thing. And, like, none of those things translate to the field at all. But with Van Ness, then he had that combine. And what is it, Morley, out of your fancy little metrics they got there? He fits basically everything except for, is it the shuttle or the 3-cone that he missed?
No, the broad jump. He's a 70. But here's the thing. The Packers traditionally, like, the cutoff line has been like 80th percentile broad or better. He's 77%.
Okay, so he's like right there.
Yeah, I don't think they'd care if they like him.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of my take on that, on how those things go. I would not be surprised if he's Green Bay's pick at 15, if he's available. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes prior to that. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes further down than that. Not a whole lot in this draft class is going to surprise me. Like, if you had to ask me right now, today, who I think Green Bay's pick is going to be based on who's been mocked there, who are some rumblings that we've heard, where do things fit? I think my answer is one of the top 2 tight ends, either Mayer or Kincaid. And just because you've heard consistently throughout the offseason, if you've paid attention, that Green Bay loves both of the top tight ends. Now, maybe they eventually, like, I don't think teams think this way either, though. Like, I don't think they are going to be like, well, we really like these two guys, but is it better for us to try and get Sam Laporta or Luke Musgrave or somebody like that in the second round? Like, I don't think they think that way, because they're just going to be like, no, we really like this dude and he's here and available now. And we know most likely that if we wait, we're not going to get him at 45. So they'll just take him at. So I think the answer, and I think between the two, now they do have a visit with Kincaid, which made me pause on this thought a little bit. But I do think that if they like a guy, it's going to be Michael Mayer more than one or the other. Like, if there is,
I think Kincaid, I think they like both of them. And I think Mayer is such a guy that, like, he's so clean. You're just like, whatever. Kincaid had the back. You're going to want to get your doctor's hands on it and get your doctors to sign off on it. Like, that's what it is to me. But
and they've kept things secret in the past. Like Jair Alexander, Jair said, like, they didn't say a word to him during the draft process.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even look at him.
And something that, when you look at all the pieces that get floated around and you try to remember what people say about things at different points, you brought up the point that draft boards essentially have been set for a long time. There are outliers. There are things that can come into play and move guys up and down, this and that. But for the most part, 95% of these boards have been set prior to the combine. And then I heard previous to the combine that teams prefer this tight end class over this wide receiver class. Okay. Teams that are probably interested and teams that are probably interested in this tight end class, or the Packers at 15 are probably the first team, and then teams in the 20s. So if people in media and people talking to me are saying stuff like that, those are the teams that they're probably talking about. And then you look at it from the standpoint of, are we then pushing these wide receivers up too much? And now we're starting to hear reports about how teams' receivers boards are all over the place. Some teams have Addison as wide receiver 1. Some people have Zay Flowers. Some people love Jackson Smith and Jigba. All this stuff in a roundabout way, like, we could just fall back on the Packers just taking a tight end at 15. And then when you look back at all that stuff, you'd say, well, the Packers clearly were one of those teams that had a higher opinion of the tight end class than the wide receiver class. Could happen, could not happen. I don't know, but it's definitely some food for thought and something that's interesting that you can kind of look back on. And if you kind of ride the roller coaster that is the draft season and you pay attention to everything that's being said, we're at a point now where it's like you can start kind of looking into all that stuff. And I say that all, Jacob, and I'll say this. It's also misinformation season, right? Yeah. It is very much the point in time where teams are lying out their ass about stuff. So we'll see.
Well, see, here's the thing, and here's the reason I'm confident. Confidence not the right word, but why I feel okay about making this prediction today. And in 2 weeks, my mind might change. Who knows? But you've heard consistently since the beginning of this process. And you add in, there's that giant gaping hole in the room to begin with. There's nobody there. So add all that together. And you've heard since the beginning that they love this tight end class. They want to get one early, or they want to get a big, a weapon at tight end kind of thing. It makes sense to me. Now we'll see if that's what ends up happening, because we've heard before that they really liked Rashad Bateman. And granted, they didn't have a chance to draft him, but they could have gone and got him, and they didn't. There are examples like that down the line that Green Bay really liked a guy, and then you find out after the fact that they had a chance to pick him and they didn't, or they didn't want to trade up and get him, whatever the case may be. But I'm interested in that to see how things go. We are out of time for this episode of the Gold Zone. I appreciate you guys stopping in tonight. We will be back next. We have 2 shows left before the draft, and that's it. So next week, we're kind of doing a hodgepodge of everything that's left. We missed a couple. Well, missing that 1 week really stung a little bit. And I think we missed another one earlier in this process as well. But so next week, defensive line, corners, safeties, it'll be kind of a hodgepodge. And then the following week, we'll do a live mock draft. We'll do a bunch of stuff on the show. And then Thursday, it's showtime. And our season finale will be May 3rd. So we have 1, 2, 3 shows left. And that'll be fun. Counting is fun. So I appreciate you guys listening tonight. If you want to hear more of our thoughts and opinions and everything, again, check that bottom line, that Green Bay draft guide. It's $9.99. Tell your friend.
True North Packers fan, talking trash on my grammatical errors. And I just have to say, I didn't write everything. Not all of it is me, but if you want to give me credit for writing all of it, I'll take it. So
Daddy, well, there you go, guys. We're out of time. We'll see you next week. Grab it. Thanks.